With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome again, by the way. Got to thank you very much for joining us on the protagonist, as I'm getting my teleprompter fixed up. Today, our topic is it's quite divisive. It's quite controversial, to say the least. It's the quiet Islamification of Britain. Now, does the UK or Britain have a problem with Islam? On the face of it, it does. But is the problem with the people, Muslims, and non-Muslims, or is it with the government? That's the question, because government, I think, is creating most of the problems. Aside from the statutes introduced targeting hate speech and criminalisation of online abuses, including religious or racial abuse, a new definition of Islamophobia is being considered, with the government launch of a working group to define unacceptable treatment, prejudice, discrimination, and hate targeting Muslims or anyone who is perceived to be Muslim. We've witnessed two-tiered justice and policing favouring the Muslim community, and frequent kowtowing of major political parties to this growing constituency. Is social unrest and anti-Muslim sentiment only now boiling over after decades of fundamental change to society? Perhaps Britons are highly tolerant people who've been denied the opportunity or have been fearful about voicing a natural opposition to social upheaval stemming from unresponsive governments and uncontrolled immigration. Before we go to our panel, let's look at the latest available stats from the 2021 census. The Muslim population in the UK grew to approximately 3.9 million in 2021, a rise of over 1 million since the previous census. This makes Muslims about 6% of the total UK population. In England, the Muslim population was 3.8 million, that's 6.7% in 2021, with a significant growth rate reported for the nation's children. Islam is the second largest religion in the United Kingdom. London has the largest population and greatest proportion, 15% of Muslims in the country. Now, our panel are commentators and astute observers of social change. They are people unafraid of speaking out about their concerns. We hope to learn from them about what they see are problems and solutions that must be taken up by UK lawmakers and communities themselves. Or is this just simply a pipe dream? And who knows with the current government under Prime Minister Starmer. David Atherton is a political commentator, journalist and broadcaster. Nuriyah Khan is host of Beyond Belief with Nuriyah Khan, a commentator and critic of Islam and woke ideology. And Robin Tilbrook is solicitor, leader and chairman of the English Democrats and chairman of the Workers' England Union. Thank you very much for joining us. First of all, I've got to ask David Atherton, are we watching the disintegration of the culture of Britain?
Yes, it's got a two or three pronged attack. It's from the government. It's from some extremist Muslims as well, and also the way I refer to it as the Marxist long walk through the institutions, whereby wokeism and political correctness are completely captured every single government organisation, NGO, and also via human resources is now entering the private companies. people are now being fired from companies for, for example, supporting Tommy Robinson, or going on a march, or supporting him in some of the rallies that he's had. Britain is in serious trouble at the moment when it comes to Islamification, and I can only see it being a one-way street. And for the moment, I really can't see any hope, to be perfectly honest.
You're right, Khan. You were Muslim. You're a critic of Islam. Where do you see the UK at the moment heading with the proliferation, or the popularity, or the numbers of those that worship Islam?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
I'm just wondering, where do you see the UK heading at the moment with Islam becoming stronger and stronger by the day, and government supporting Islam and sort of shutting out the local Brit?
Yeah, well, I mean, I myself am a second generation Muslim immigrant, well, ex-Muslim now since I'm leaving the faith. But what the most worrying trend to me is how kind of the young demographic of Muslims in this country, especially second and third generation who were born here and educated here, are kind of reverting to a more extreme version of Islam. And you see that proliferating through universities and Islamic schools, which they're attending parallel to, the regular education they're receiving. And they're kind of absorbing Islam as part of their identity, first and foremost, as opposed to identifying with the Britain that they've grown up in. And as Dave mentioned, it's just the government who's allowing this to kind of perpetuate. Whereas, Islam itself, if you ask me 10 years ago, I would have a different answer, not because this wasn't happening, but because I'm very ignorant to the teachings of Islam. And if the government is allowing these young populations to get more and more extreme in their beliefs, and actually think of Britain as an oppressive force, that's, the reason for so many ills in society, and therefore we need to turn back towards our religion, which is Islam, I think we've got a very worrying time ahead of us.
And Robin Tilbrook, what do you think?
Well, I agree with both previous speakers, which is obviously not that helpful from the point of view of debate. But I think we are at a point where Islam is becoming more and more of a feature of our country. I mean, just to give an example, if you go into our supermarkets, you find that over 70% of all the meat that you could buy there is halal or religious slaughter. This is something that's occurred without any protest or any effort by officials to prevent it. It's directly against the law, but nevertheless is something that's going on. And our schools, we're doing a survey of schools. It turns out that a lot of our schools, even where there are actually no Muslim pupils at all, are serving just halal meat, and that's it.
David, I'm just wondering, how have we got to this point? I mean, because I mentioned figures before, and the growing numbers of those that follow Islam or Muslims. And by the way, we're not critical of Islam as such. What we are critical of is that the UK.
I am.
Okay, tell me why.
Well, let me give you the bottom line. If somebody tomorrow rewrote the Quran in its current form, it will be banned for hate speech. There is justifications in the Quran for the rape of non-Muslims, beating your wife, and there are numerous versions of do not take Jews and Christians as your friends. It is also supremacist. Basically, apparently there is more anti-Semitism in the Quran than there is in Hitler's Mein Kampf.
I just want to ask you one thing. And by the way, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm trying to just take this
Sure.
in the middle here, so that we have some perceived fairness.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering though, and we've interviewed many people, and then I'll have a chat to Nuriyah about this too. Does Islam fit in with Western society?
No, it doesn't. No.
Then why have we allowed it?
Well, the bottom line in Britain is that somewhere around 80% of British Muslims vote for the Labour Party. The Labour Party is in power. If I can speak generally, 80% of British Muslims you probably describe as they might be small c conservative, but I refer to them as broadly speaking moderate. Then you have the 20% of headbangers, the militants, the ISIS lovers, the people that excuse what happened on the 7th of October in 2023 in Israel. So what you have is the militant, the 20% militant tail wagging the moderate dog, and the government is petrified of upsetting British Muslims in this country. You look, for example, what happened to Aston Villa. A mob of thugs turned up to picket the place when the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans were banned, and the people who were counter demonstrating were in the so-called Jew pen. The banning of the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans in Aston Villa was sheer, in my opinion, sheer naked anti-Semitism and racism, and they don't care. No, that is how they've been brought up. There was a survey done in 2010 by the Pew Center. They polled people in the Middle East and other countries. Do you have a favourable or unfavourable opinion of Jews? And generally speaking, with the Middle East countries like Egypt and Palestine, Jordan, it was something like 95 to 98% of Middle Eastern Muslims have an unfavourable opinion of Jews. Now, and the figure for Pakistan was 78%. So this is sort of the visceral hatred of a country that's 0.4% of the land that's occupied by Muslims, and there's 9.7 million of them living in Israel. A quarter of them are non-Jews, but they still want to hate on one group of people day in, day out. And there was a very new low recently, I think Sunday, where a pro-Palestinian mob turned up at St John's Wood synagogue in North London and picketed the place. And there was one guy there particularly nasty. I think his name's Hajjaj, and he was asked to go away by one of the congregation, and she said to him, "What's your problem?" And the guy turned around and said, the mask came off, the mask slipped. It's Jews. Yeah, pure hatred. I've had enough of it, and something needs to be done about it.
I have to ask Nuriyah what she thinks about that also. But does, and you have first-hand knowledge, does Islam fit in with Western society?
Absolutely not. Just to kind of go off what Dave said as well, I mean, I think there's a profound ignorance in a large proportion of the West, and then there's also a concerted effort to allow Islam to kind of run rampant because it fits in with this anti-Western agenda. But I think the people who view Islam as just any other benign religion are really missing it for what it actually is, because I've lived in that faith, I grew up in that faith, and yes, you can be a nominal Muslim and just kind of have a personal belief of yours and pray behind closed doors. But actually, anybody who studies the scriptures or looks into it, or even just reads it in English and doesn't apply the general premise that any other religion has, that it can evolve and it can adapt over time. Because remember, Islam is stuck in time. It is the infallible, timeless, eternal word of God. It is perfect. You cannot change that. It is completely averse to reform. And that's why we get people continuously to this day who are carrying out these atrocities in the name of exactly what their book inspires them to do. Because, I mean, you compare any man-made laws side by side with the Quran, and human laws trump it every single time. You've got, insane, they're called the hudud punishments in Islam, but the absolute barbarity of punishments, including amputations and beheadings that take you right back to the medieval Arabia, and these countries aren't, doing every single day left, right, and center now. But I lived in Saudi Arabia 15 years ago, and you could go and see amputations happening casually after a Friday prayer. It was part and parcel of life there. You had a morality police that would go around with a whip in hand to make sure that everybody stayed in line. And this, I mean, I lived in a compound full of expats, so even British women there. So it's not something that, it is going to evolve and become compatible with the West. It is very much stuck in its time. And that's why you look anywhere in the world where Islam or theocracy is prevalent, and you will see this in action. Look at what the Taliban are doing in Afghanistan. When theocracy gets in absolute full power like that, they will even not just have gender apartheid, but they will stop little girls from going to school. There will be forced marriages. There will be child marriages in certain sects of Islam. They will be pushing for things like FGM to be carried out. Why in the UK are we grappling with, having to issue FGM protection orders? These things weren't part of the culture here, but they have been imported and allowed to fester as part of cultural cohesion, because for so long we've been tiptoeing around this is just their culture. We can't implant our views onto them because that would be wrong of us. But genuinely, some cultures are not equal, and that is very much the case when it comes to Islam. And I just want to remind people that Islam is not a race. So there's no way you can be racist to an ideology which is much more than that, because it's very political in its nature. So it is not the benign religion. And women and children are the first casualties of Islam wherever you look.
Robin, what do you think?
Yes, well, I agree. The thing is, Islam is a political religion. It is a religion that demands to be centre stage. It demands to be the supreme arbiter of every part of behaviour, the entire sort of routine of life, and that is very difficult in any case to integrate. But our authorities have made no effort to integrate. Quite the contrary. What they're doing is so-called multiculturalism. They are basically enabling the idea that people should live in sort of ghettos where there's sort of a single culture prevailing, and quite a lot of our city areas now have people barely integrating at all with the mainstream culture, the host culture. If we say anything in criticism of that, then we come up against various sort of hate speech laws, and we have this something that people have very much noticed. We have this sort of two-tier enforcement arrangement, whereby if somebody's doing something that's about extreme Islam, they get very little in the way of punishment. Whereas if somebody is criticising Islam, they get into trouble. And I'll just give you a for instance that's ongoing. So a Turkish protester burnt a Quran outside the Turkish embassy. It was his own Quran, and he shouted some insults against the Turkish government, I think. And obviously the Turkish government is quite an Islamist government. And whilst he was doing this, a Muslim attacked him with a knife, and repeatedly tried to stab him, shouted that he was going to kill him, and did actually injure him a little bit, but was not very effective with his knife, and was stopped before he actually managed to kill him. But if you look at the film, it looks pretty clear that it was an attempted murder. So this guy, he winds up getting a suspended sentence. He doesn't even go to prison for it. Whereas the guy who's burnt the Quran was originally convicted of hate speech, in effect, a public order offence, and then he's been acquitted. But the CPS are now appealing to the High Court to try and overturn the order, so that burning your own Quran in a public place could be treated as being a blasphemy offence. Now, that wouldn't happen if it was the Bible.
Yeah, well, Robin, just a bit of legal. Just a quick couple of questions on this one. I assume Hamid Koskin can't be reconvicted. Is it the CPS that are just appealing the actual decision itself for future reference?
Yes, I think that is right, David. But the point is that what they're hoping to achieve out of this, it seems, is to make it so that there is actually a blasphemy law,
Yeah,
and so that
indeed, yeah.
you can't effectively criticise Islam, and you can't even mistreat the Quran if it's your own book.
Do you think
Which I think,
Lord Herman's behind this?
oh, very likely.
He's
He
our
is.
Attorney General.
He's our Attorney General. But the interesting thing I think about the way that multiculturalism is being applied is that it does seem as if the left, the extreme left, want to use Islamism as a sort of battering ram to smash down our traditional society here in England. And
Sure.
that also seems to be the case elsewhere in the West.
Mm.
So, but I think that they are misjudging it, because I think that actually Islamism is probably a more powerful and potent force than communism,
Oh
which
yeah,
is
and it wins every
great.
time. If you look throughout history, Islam comes out on top. But
Yeah.
Robin, can you imagine as well, like the kind of judgments that they're trying to put with burning the Quran is equating it to like offending the institution of Islam. I mean, how can you offend an institution? This is what when the Islamophobia definition didn't go through for very good reason, and I commend everybody that's done work to bring that to the forefront, because there were some very shady kind of meetings that they were having in this all parliamentary group, and the kind of organizations that they were instilling to be a part of it and advise for recommendations were organizations like MEND, Muslim Engagement and Development, who call themselves a civil grassroots organization to help Muslims get into positions of politics and media and what have you. They've got people sitting at high levels of that who are completely have passed anti-Semitic remarks, have said that Muslim soldiers need to rebel against British soldiers if you were in the army. They have been found to be supporting members of Al Qaeda. And these are the people who are advising government officials on what we can and cannot say when it comes to Islam. And that's what we have the proof is in the pudding with this Turkish man for burning the Quran.
Are you referring to the UMA, the Worldwide Brotherhood of Islam?
It's sort of even worse than that, isn't it? Because the people who were who were on this advisory committee, which was initially quite secret, and indeed secretive as to what it was discussing, they were selected by leftist MPs and ministers. It wasn't a mistake to have Islamist thinkers and activists on that committee. It was deliberate, and that's what I was sort of saying about the way multiculturalism is being applied as a sort of battering ram to smash down Western values, and using Islamism to do that, as that's seen as being a much more aggressive force in attacking the West.
Can I ask you something? Sorry, David, I just want to ask you. Multiculturalism, I mean, it's worked enormously well around the world. I mean, look at the States, look at New York, look at Australia, and up until fairly recently, look at the UK. It's gone south. David, why would that be?
Well, why has multiculturalism failed?
Yeah, and it's not with the Italians or the Greeks or whatever. It just seems to be.
Sure. But basically, Muslims versus non-Muslims, in that respect. Are you referring to that? What's happened is that the Labour government and the establishment have been captured, by the Muslim lobby. They're hoping they're the crocodile, will eat them last. I think it's also a form of Stockholm syndrome, whereby if we humour you and play your game, we'll be okay, kind of thing. But if we're talking about how the left are trying to manipulate and use the Muslim lobby for their own purposes. If you look at what happened in Iran in 1979 when Ayatollah Khomeini took over, once he'd established his power base, 2 years after he came into the power, he went out and butchered all the left. I've read figures of 30,000 people were summarily executed in Iran. From the I think the party slogan was Marxism with an Islamic face. So there was also that case where they had a situation in Tower Hamlets where the UKIP protest was banned, and instead, a lot of frothing mouth British Muslims turned up, and a leftist was at a loud hailer, and he said to one of the people who was marching past or walking past, "We're on your side," and the Muslim turned around and said, "You're not on mine, mate. I tell you." So it's absolute naivety when it comes to that, and they will pay the price. And and the point is, one thing we haven't explored on this one as well is the reason we have two-tier policing and the Muslim lobby gets so many soft suds treatment is because if they were treated like everybody else in this country, they would be rioting. That was the reason the police banned the Maccabi fans in Aston Villa, simply because they feared a riot from the local Muslims. Birmingham is now 50% Muslim. It's half of the city is now is run and looked after by the Muslim lobby there at the moment. Of course, all the local MPs have been winding everybody up, and there's also some other Muslim activists who live in Birmingham who are capitalising on what's going on. But David Betts, who is a professor of urban warfare, King's College London University. Now he's forecasting a civil war in this country. He hasn't specified when it might be. I think maybe 10 years, maybe before, whereby the government has sucked up to the Muslim lobby so much at the expense of non-Muslims. I think the people's anger will grow and grow and grow, and it will have a clash. I'm not saying the civil war is going to be literally sort of like Israel and Hamas, where it's guns and what have you. But I'm talking about riots and counter protests, and which will become violent. And it's simply because we have appeased the militant British Muslim community to the nth degree. We are the architects of our own downfall.
And David, sorry, we've been doing that since about 1989, since the whole Rushdie affair. If you look at what they're trying to do, I mean, in the protests there, them smashing down W.H. Smith, trying to get make sure the book was not published, trying to silence journalists, and then this obviously the successive culture of fear and intimidation, and the government silence on top of that. We've had actual, even surprisingly, Labour councillors from Slough, for example, more recently had come out in the defence of the Batley Grammar School teacher, just a post saying you'd be welcome in Slough. I'm really sorry for what happened to you and your family. She literally got dragged to the mosque, not physically, but metaphorically dragged to the mosque, had to atone for her sins in front of 3 Muslim men and say, I take back my words, delete her post, and essentially make sure he is unwelcome in Slough and he would know what happened to him if he ever, stepped foot in that area. Slough, like Luton, like Tower Hamlets, where you've got completely parallel societies operating. It's just people there's a whole segment of white flight, and I don't blame people for moving away, but it's how long can this continue where you move closer and closer towards the countryside because every town you once knew and large parts of London are captured, and that's why Sadiq Khan is so comfortable knowing that his votes are guaranteed because the block they've wanted is secure.
There's also the other example as well in Wakefield, where that 14-year-old autistic boy was accused of scuffing the Quran. I've actually got the video of her at the local mosque, with her hair covered, offering grovelling apologies. And if you look at the audience that's there, it's completely men who, she's facing an audience of completely men, sitting cross-legged on the floor. And just to rub our noses in it, there was a chief constable from the West Yorkshire Police present to nod in all the right places. That's disgusting. That's absolutely appalling.
Robin,
both Wakefield and Slough are not majority Muslim towns. This kind of control and influence is occurring even in towns where they are not majority Muslim.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask what's happened with the and to everybody, what's happened to the grooming inquiry, grooming gang inquiry? Has this been put out to pasture?
Yes. So what's happened is,
Tell me, has anything happened?
well, the government said they were going to do a proper inquiry, a statutory national inquiry, um, and they said so, as I've explained before, just as we were getting to the point where they had to put in a defence in the case that we'd brought. Um, but they haven't actually done anything very much. It looks like Jess Phillips, the minister responsible, she's supposed to be her responsibility is supposed to include violence against women, preventing violence against women. But when it comes to violence against these young girls, she was seeming to trying to manipulate the arrangements so as to ensure that there were pro-Islamist people on the panel.
Sure.
And so we would have wound up with an arrangement which would most certainly not have been a proper statutory inquiry. I think it would have been challengeable in court, but then you've got to make sure that you wind up with a judge that's not sympathetic to multiculturalism and to Jess Phillips, as many of them are.
Indeed. I think also, I think it was at least four, maybe five ladies, victims, survivors, actually resigned from the inquiry.
Yeah.
Because they are not going to discuss the theological reasons, the theoretical reasons behind why these mainly Pakistani Muslim, certainly 95 paper I read, 95% of the abusers were Muslim, the ideological reason behind it. And if you look at Quran 424, that is where it is justified to rape non-Muslims. The phrase is that's used in the Quran is what your right hand possesses. There was also that came out. I don't know whether you guys caught the Christian Concern paper, and they actually said it's less about ethnicity, i.e., they're Pakistani or Bangladeshi or Iraqis or Iranians or whoever it may be, but it's more about their religion that motivated them to motivated them to abuse the girls. Just one final very quick point. In Oxford, there were 7 people jailed. 4, their abuse was that bad, 4 were actually jailed for life of the girls that were there. And there was an article in 2013 written by moderate Imam Dr. Taj Hargay. And he actually said the local imams in the area in Oxford actually encouraged the men to go out there and abuse the girls. It was actively encouraged.
Nuriyah,
Well, just on that note, sorry. Yeah.
Nuriyah, you were practicing Muslim for how many years?
Oh, my entire life until about 23 years.
Okay, can you tell me how they treat women from your own experience?
Yeah, I mean, the Quran itself says that, women are subordinate to men and men are a degree above women in superiority, essentially because they're caretakers of women. But by extension, there's a hierarchy, as Dave was saying, and Muslim women are kind of put on this like pedestal, especially if they're covered up, versus all non-Muslim women who essentially in a perfect Islamic state or in a state of war are fair game. But as you can see, what's happening under the Taliban, women themselves are considered chattel and the property of men. So they're not really allowed to even leave their house in the most extreme interpretations of Islam. You are you're almost like you're a child that never grows up, because you're bound by this system called the wali system, which is the guardianship system in Arabic. And you see this still play out in the Middle East and the Gulf countries, where a woman has to get permission from her husband or her father or grandfather, uncle, any living male relative, the closest one, for permission to work, for permission to travel, for permission to marry. And you're only kind of throughout your life passed from one male to another. You don't have any agency, so to speak, of your own. So that is the general kind of view of women. Your testimony is worth half in court. You get half the inheritance. as your brother would, and you don't have the right to divorce as well, according to strict Islamic interpretations. And just quickly to say on the grooming gang scandal as well, I have been approached to speak at whatever part of the inquiry is going to happen next, and I do intend to make that link very much because, as Dave and Robin were saying, even with the victim survivors, they have made them mince their words when it comes to the actual extent of the religious abuse or the spiritual abuse that was done to them as it was happening. Whereas the verses that Dave quoted, there's a couple of others where the perpetrators were verbatim quoting the Quran as they were abusing these young girls. So I, especially coming from the faith, I know the mentality that Muslim men have when discussing these things and what they say behind closed doors and how this is used by extension as a weapon of war. Like, it's very, very dark. But I intend to make that link very clear, because it's not just something we see in the UK, but it's a wider pattern across Europe where, it's only the passport that changes and the location of the crime, but the common denominator is the ideology of Islam.
Yeah, David?
Well, indeed, yeah. I tell you what I do. My handy Quran, comes to hand. So I'll just go back to 424. This is what it says. And also prohibited to you all, married women, except those your right hand possess. That is the decree of Allah upon you, and lawful to you are all others beyond these, provided that you seek them in marriage with gifts from your property, desiring chastity, not unlawful sexual intercourse. So for whatever you're enjoying of marriage, from them give them their due compensation as an obligation. So there we are. That is it in plain English, the justification of the abuse of non-Muslims. Yeah, and the thing about the in Christianity, Leviticus 20 is quite plain in the context that a man shall not sleep with another man like he does a woman. It is an abomination. It's complete rejection of homosexuality. But of course, we have secular laws which rightly allow these acts to go through. The Quran to most of the Muslims cannot be abrogated. It cannot be reinterpreted for a new age. It is the final word of God, and it shall never change. Which is itself an intimidation in its own right. I'm sorry. We are living in a world whereby we sort of brush these things under the carpet, when really what we have is a particularly oppressive, not only religious type ideology, but it's also political as well. I've seen videos of converts, European converts to Islam, and they're given lists of things that are allowed and things that are haram that are banned. It's complete control of an individual. It is the complete opposite of libertarianism, which I count myself as one of them.
Now, Robin, I was just thinking as the numbers increase, also the threat to those who are non-Muslim grows also, doesn't it?
Yes, and I think it is worth just pointing out that the figures that you were talking about are from the census. And the census, people are supposed to fill it out, but they don't necessarily do so. We don't know how accurate those figures are. That's also now nearly 5 years ago that those figures were produced, and since then we've had immigration at a rate which has exceeded 1 million new immigrants every year for several years. So probably the numbers of Muslims in the country is probably more like 10% rather than 6% now. And I think we're just not finding that the people, the secular people, have any comprehension of what they're engaged with. They simply do not understand faith, and they particularly don't understand the Muslim faith, and they assume that it's just going to sort of dissolve into secularism. That is not going to happen, and it is a grave mistake, and we are headed for serious trouble.
Yeah, absolutely.
David, and I'll also ask Nuriyah too, because I want to find out about the the perception, or is it real? How real is it? The Muslim Brotherhood, and how strong is it in the UK?
Is it ladies first? Go on, go on, go on. I think it's ladies first. I've got a lot to say on this.
All right, you go first.
Yeah, well, I'll let Dave go, but I'll just quickly say that I think essentially that they've got kind of, it's, in my eyes, I call it like this new wave of jihad. So it's not the old jihad where, you're riding on horseback and you're doing Islamic military style expansions, but you are now trying to infiltrate institutions, make sure they are captured from the inside. And it's like, attack kind of white collar institutions, whether it's councils, university level funding, and try and capture a whole generation in that sense, even, through harmless things such as like an Islamophobia awareness training that will be delivered via a council to a school. But the kind of nefarious people that you've got directing these things are that with the state we've got to in the UK. I mean, I would say I'm in London at the moment, and it is entirely captured. If you look at even the university I went to and the university my siblings are currently studying at, you can see through and through, if you just follow the money, that the Muslim Brotherhood, whether it's directed through Qatar, whether it's directed through mostly Saudi Arabia as well, there has been a concerted effort to infiltrate Western institutions, but make it so kind of seemingly benign that you've got this whole new generation of youngsters, and especially Muslim youngsters, who have no connection to the country that they were born in, but they are singing to the same tunes of what the Muslim Brotherhood would essentially want them to. So yeah, I think it's an insane issue we need to grapple with in the UK, and you've got to follow the money.
Absolutely. I believe the Muslim Brotherhood have infiltrated the British government, certainly the civil service in this country. For example, it is believed the Muslim Council of Britain is involved in the Islamophobia definition. They were banned in 2015 by David Cameron's government from offering any further advice. In the 1990s, it was Muslim Brotherhood that advised the Muslim Council of Britain on the best way to get Islamophobia onto the agenda. Within the civil service in Britain, there are 700 Muslims working, and they formed their own network. There is a principle in Islam, as I mentioned earlier, called the Ummah, the international brotherhood of Muslims, whereby your first loyalty is to your religion and to Allah rather than the country that you're living in. I think there was I forgot the guy's name, but he comes from Dubai, and he's actually said that Britain is one of the greatest centres of Islamic extremism in the world. I think he also mentioned Qatar as well. We are in serious trouble in this country, and unless we take strong and remedial action against these people, it is only going to get a lot worse, and we will be paying the price for it.
Robin?
Yeah, it is worth bearing in mind that the very word Islamophobia is a Muslim Brotherhood creation. It was a deliberate attempt to try and make it so it's sort of medicalized, that any opposition to Islam is a phobia, and so it's a sort of mental health condition to be in opposition, and it's intended as a weapon to attack Western values. It was right from the start, and the Muslim Brotherhood obviously was created in the context of trying to undermine the British Empire in Egypt in particular, but it was also an offshoot from activity that had occurred in India, and that agenda has carried on. They are working towards the conclusion of what they were wanting to do right from the start, and they're being very successful, I'd say.
Nuriyah, can I just ask you? You were having left the fold, so to speak. Do you feel for your own safety, and do you fear that there are ramifications? Because it's to do what you've done is extremely brave, but there has to be some sort of ramifications from their point of view. And you're very public too, so the perception or the information that you're that you're transmitting to everybody is going to create a fair bit of heat for the Muslims, and they would probably most likely, especially the guys, would like to probably shut you up.
Oh, absolutely. I'm always kind of mindful of the fact that there could be one nutter out there that could, take his religion too seriously and choose to act on it. So, I mean, I take whatever precautions I can. I've moved a couple of times. I'm very discreet about, the locations of where I work, and I make sure I drive everywhere, little things like that. But yeah, in an ideal world, I think they would like the biggest threat to Islam, I think, is a woman who's left it and then speaks out publicly. They absolutely hate that, and they're not really used to dealing with that. There are actually some sects of Islam that have no punishment for a woman apostatizing because they just can't think that a woman's mind can conceive of leaving the faith, and in all the others, it's death. So the only kind of consolation I have is theoretically in the Britain I knew and grew up in, I would be protected by the state and by law. But it seems like everything is currently working against me and against my safety and protections and freedom to criticize this religion. But yeah, I mean, I've got plenty of threats, and I almost stopped doing this in its tracks when I first started. And then I kind of tried to just push past it and say, it becomes almost like a moral obligation to speak about how dark this ideology really is.
Absolutely. Just one very quick one from me. The worst thing I've had is I had somebody from a fundamentalist Islamic media company phone up a private detective looking for my home address. Yes, so
it's hard to find you. You're in a caravan, aren't you? Keep moving around.
I'm on the moon, Elon Musk has got nothing on me.
3 steps ahead of them, David.
But David, I want to ask you, because you're in the media, this is fueled by legacy media, and not just legacy media. There's a whole bunch of independents who are underplaying this and creating or almost inciting violence.
Well, indeed, yeah. It's it's the crocodile analogy. Because it doesn't really affect them on a day-to-day basis, and they're sort of human rightsy lawyer type, complacent hamster living type people. To them, being far right is worse than the abuse of an underage girl. Being far right, is worse than the murder of a man in the street in West Drayton or Hillingdon or wherever it may be. One of the most disgusting things I ever saw was there was a vigil for Rhiannon's Sky White, who was murdered in Walsall in the West Midlands. And it was a vigil. It wasn't a protest. It was a vigil to remember her. She was 27 years of age. She was stabbed, I think, 30 odd times, and she died of her wounds in hospital. And the Antifa, the stand up to racism people turned up to protest at the vigil. This is because they were far right, or they perceived them to be far right. I always say, well, I'm not, I'm right rather than wrong, sort of thing, But this is the whole mentality of the left in this country. It's absolutely disgusting. And what I think the crux lies here is that the liberal left have to admit that we were right all along. You look at the way Tommy Robinson's been vindicated day in, day out, on the grooming gangs. I remember the interview he had in 2011 with Jeremy Paxman on the BBC Newsnight. And Paxman was sitting there, what about these grooming gangs, Mr. Robinson? He sat there sneering at him, he took an incredulous tone towards him. He's been entirely vindicated. The other thing that's happened as well, Tommy Robinson's been right on, is the way that the Muslims have taken over the jails in this country. That Mosa, I think his name is, the Afghan channel migrant who was jailed for illegal entry to this country. He's doing TikTok videos from prison. For example, when it comes to cooking time in jails, no warder is allowed to go in there. It's complete takeover in this country. But yeah, I think recent developments, like for example, like the fact that grooming gangs have come in, have now been renamed Pakistani rape gangs. Also, the protest that was done in Tower Hamlets, where all those thugs turned up. Probably the most grievous one has been the protest at St John's Wood synagogue. People are, it's a community centre, it's a place of worship, and they protested there. I think it's now becoming into plain sight how extremist many British Muslims are, and it will be time that there will be a reckoning, and they will have to say, yes, you guys were all right all along.
Nuriyah, so I'm going to ask Robin about the politicians in a sec, but from law and order, they're failing, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, that's what the kind of two-tier justice that was alluded to earlier. It's kind of emboldening Muslims to, there are certain parts of this country that you cannot go to because the enclaves are so dangerous in the sense that we've got people who are the dawah gangs, the Muslim preachers, if you will, but they've got such a large following. And like I said, that's a very worrying trend when you've got young Muslims who are getting more radicalized and they're listening to the likes of people like Muhammad Hijab and Ali Dawa in this country, and they're actually saying we've got Muslim gangsters. If you step into this area, you will be dealt with. And they're using that justification to be a pushback to the quote unquote far right that never really seems to challenge them in the way that they say they do. But there's been incidents where I think it was even after Southport or one of the other areas where kind of riots broke out, and you saw police officers saying, or videos coming out, people saying, if you've got weapons, take them back to your mosque, take them back to the local mosque. And you think, what is this? Yeah, Stoke, sorry. This kind of insane protectionism when it comes to Muslims for various reasons, whether you're too afraid to be called the R word, whether you're trying to protect community cohesion. And I mean, in London specifically, the Metropolitan Police has been completely captured. They probably have Islamophobia trainings every other week as opposed to, being able to actually police real crime. So if you are like an English white lady and you have been, wrongly assaulted or something by, the wrong kind of brown, you can best believe that the police are not going to act on that in the way you would expect them to. And, this is why basic things like recording ethnicities of perpetrators should not be something that we hide away from.
And Robin, from the political side of things, it seems that both Conservatives and Labor are probably in the same boat together. How do we fix that?
Well, with great difficulty, as I'm not totally convinced that reform is very much on this particular agenda.
No, I'm not either.
So, from a political point of view, you can't see your way clear to sorting it out. Both Labour and the Conservatives have been very supportive of the kind of multiculturalist approach that we've been talking about and the two-tier policing. It's all happened. Much of that developed under supposedly Conservative administration, and obviously it's now got steroids under the Labour administration. So you can't really see how it's going to sort itself out politically, and that's why what David was saying about Professor David Betts of London University, because he's basically saying that we aren't really going to be able to sort it out politically. And that's why we might well wind up in civil war. And I think he was actually even more downbeat about what was going to happen than Dave was, because I think his line is that it's going to happen within 5 years.
David, can I ask you if, which is we know anyway, that the police and the politicians, and you're right also, Robin, about Nigel. I think he's just waiting again. He kept saying he's waiting for his celebrity game show to appear. He'll be the next host, but until then, he's going to create and promise people the world. But really, politicians, David, the politicians, the police, none of them want to fix it, do they?
They daren't fix it. They know full well if they start wanting to ban halal or ban cousin marriages, they're going to get death threats. They're going to be intimidated. They are going to be assaulted. And so there's no stomach for it. I've got to be fair to Nick Timothy, he's the Conservative MP for West Suffolk, and also Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary. Makes a change for me to be praising Conservative MPs these days, but they have actually taken a stand against it, and I wish them very well. Nick Timothy particularly has been very good. He stood up in Parliament and said, I don't believe in Allah, I don't believe in the Prophet Muhammad, and I have no time for Islam, and he's been quite blunt about it. The word there was. To be fair, there wasn't any stink in the press or any pushback from anybody else. But yeah, the politicians of this country, spineless, maybe understand their position to a certain extent, and unfortunately, it's left to people like ourselves, Nuriyah and Robin, to make the point about Islam and bring it to people's attention.
So we've all agreed that it's going to get way worse before it gets better, but we also probably agree it may not get better. Robin mentioned that there is always talk of a revolution, and I'm one of those at times that thinks that we need a revolution because everything else has failed. If we were to have a revolution, David, do you think how would it look? And when we say it's going to get worse before it gets better, but it's not going to get better, what can we look forward to in the future?
I think Britain will become like Israel. There always will be this sort of perceived threat hanging over us, and and it really is going to be very pretty. I think you'll probably get you'll find people segregating completely. You have the sort of Muslim area and the white area and what have we. I think we will not be understanding each other at all, and it will just be one big propaganda war. And I think the politicians will be completely spineless about it. And
Will it be violent?
Sorry?
Will it be violent?
Let's be honest. Yes, I think there will be lots of violence. Again, if you look what's happening, in London, what's happening in St John's Wood, what's happening in Birmingham, they were itching to go out there and cause a fuss probably the reference I would take is after the Southport Mall murders, where Russell Riddick Obama killed those 3 little girls. Things became violent. I don't want things to become violent. I want the rule of law. I want peace in this country. I want a negotiated settlement. But I got a funny feeling that there are certain people around who won't allow that to happen.
Nuriyah, we're just talking about revolution and as maybe the final outcome of this, because it's going to get worse before it gets better. From a Muslim side of perspective, how will it look? A revolution and getting worse before it gets better, which is not going to get better.
Well, I think obviously with this kind of powder keg situation we're seeing, and the Labour government is just going to exacerbate that even more. When you see these breakouts or these little pockets of civil unrest, it's very worrying from the Muslim perspective, because we've got first of all, we've got with the mass migration, we've got young fighting age men coming over. And obviously, Dave alluded to this earlier, but the Muslim mindset is the Ummah, which is the Muslim, essentially the global brotherhood. And regardless of your differences amongst each other, you are in a eternal fight against, the infidel West. So when things get really tough, already you can see pockets where it's very questionable what's happening in certain Islamic schools with their, cadet systems, with them doing some mosques have been reported to have gyms being built underneath them or adjacent to them. And like I said, with the constant radicalization that's happening, we don't know what's being said in Friday sermons in some of the major mosques around the country, which is again why I think we need to adopt the French model and have all the Muslim clerics and imams vetted, and we need all the sermons to be said in English. But you have this young, dejected, ready to fight, young testosterone-filled British Muslim or Muslim that's just come over to Britain who really harbors a grudge. And so I think they will feel like it is their right and their duty to go up against these patriots or people who genuinely are trying to defend their country. And you see them, the inbuilt aspect of Islam is very kind of warrior-esque anyway. Islam is a kind of warrior, macho, alpha, religion in that sense. And it's very worrying that the youngsters are coming out of madrasas and going to the gyms and then sharing all these really inflammatory things on TikTok, on YouTube, the people that they're listening to, and the way that they talk about the far right is genuinely like you talk about enemies of Islam, or even people who are concerned citizens like myself. They talk about us like we are standing in the way of their utopia. So I will think it will get extremely violent. I mean, let's hope it doesn't come to that, but it is definitely on the cards.
Robin, it's depressing that we're talking about these sorts of things, but we've been quite realistic about this. It's not going to get better. It's just not going to get better. There could be a revolution of sorts. I don't know what it would look like. What do you think a revolution would look like? And many others, not just us talking about it, others have predicted this. And if you keep going the way we're going to go, which we are going to go that way, it's going to create all sorts of angst amongst the non-Muslim community. If you look at those that are coming into the UK at the moment, these, always hear these fit fighting men and youth, fit and fighting. That's a worry, because if you get into a fight, the difference between a good soldier or a good fighter, the good fighter, when he hits you or does something, he actually wants to hurt you. Do you think the Brits are ready for a good fight? Because sure, you're going to have a group that know how to fight, but the majority of Brits don't want to have a revolution. They don't want any of this. They just want to lead their lives. So I'm not too sure if I could see Mrs. McGregor living down the street taking on a group of angry young Muslims, or trying to quell the revolution. What do you think?
Well, I think you're right. The British people and English people haven't wanted this. They've voted against all the developments that have occurred. They've been ignored. They've been sneered at and labelled far right for saying anything like that. So the establishment has now got us to a point where if there is a revolution, as you put it, it will be more like Lebanon, I think, than anywhere else. That will be the end point for the failure of multiculturalism. You then wind up with sort of ghettos where if you're of one group and you cross into another, you're literally in danger of your life. And that's where we'll be.
Yeah, but basically Hezbollah actually won that civil war in the end. They're in complete control of the south of Lebanon at the moment. When they have parliamentary elections in the southern part of Lebanon, no one dares stand against the Hezbollah candidate, or they get killed.
Yeah, that's true. What Lebanon has become is a series of sort of ghetto enclaves.
Yeah.
Whereas originally it was a majority Christian country after the end of empire, and quite a forward-looking one. But they then had a large influx of Palestinian refugees. They took more than I think any of the other surrounding countries, and the government then got attacked.
I'm just thinking it's not just the UK. And we always talk about the disassembling of the West, and this is just part of the whole process. I think there's not what we're just talking about, but if it's going to happen in the UK, it's going to happen in other Western nations, isn't it? It's not just going to stop and just be all confined to one particular country.
The object lesson, though, is that you need people with guts who are actually going to stand up and
we haven't got it.
Take a firm approach. That hasn't happened in it.
No, it's not going to. And if you look at under the Biden administration in the US, they don't know who's come in. So you could have a bunch of very angry Muslim people who want to do terrible, terrible damage, and you have already, it's like a powder keg between those that follow Trump and those that don't follow Trump, and the Democrats doing what they can to rip apart the soul of America. The whole Western world and society is facing a real challenge. I don't know whether we're strong enough to resist it, because at the moment, if you look at the UK, and even here, we will complain about things and whinge and gripe about it, but government still does what it wants to do, and I don't know any other way around it, except some sort of if I say revolution, they'll call me a guy that wants to create violence, but it's not. The fact is, what do you do if you've got nothing else to do, or nothing else you can do? So I think we're in deep trouble. I do think that the West, leading with the UK at the moment, is facing all sorts of obstacles. You have no support from your constabulary or law and order. You've got politicians who are as weak as anything, and who do not want to change it. And then you have the media, who could actually do something, not just legacy, but on the other side too, independent media. I know one independent media organisation that is anti-West beyond belief, and so you don't want that. You want some sort of pushback. And we're not saying that we want to run everybody out of town, but what we do want is for people to obey the law, follow law and order, live as a community, not come over to a particular country to integrate, but what they want to do is move it to a particular country and take over. And it's an invasion, isn't it, David?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. To be fair, the open window, what is permissible and decent to talk about in public or over the dinner table, has shifted massively to the right. And people are now openly talking about re-migration. Certainly deporting illegals.
But that's not going to happen. But let's be real. I mean, a great idea, and I think it should happen. You tell me. Look at the Tories. Look at Labor. Look at Nigel and Reform UK, and you tell me, do you really think, hand on heart, that will ever happen?
I think. In fact, Reform have actually addressed this. What they want to do is they have addressed it. But if Reform, they should become the next administration in 28, 29, or even 27. Some people have said. And I do genuinely believe that there is a will within the Reform Party to do something about it. I probably know a little bit more than most people about this subject, because I've passed on some notes of my own, which they seem to like. No, I think Nigel Farage, and certainly I know his advisors, know the existential threat we are facing at the moment, and it does need robust dealing with. Another idea, which also the Tories have adopted, is the Danish model. In this country, you need to earn £38,700 a year to be a net contributor to this country, i.e., if you earn less than that, you consume more in national health, infrastructure, GP, schools, and things like that. Only 1 in 20 of migrants actually earn £38,700 a year or more, and they're thinking of adopting the Danish model, whereby when you come up for your residency in 5 years' time, they look at how much tax you paid, whether you commit any offences, and if you don't meet a certain criteria, you have lost your ability to become a permanent resident. So if you've been on welfare for 5 years, you're out. And I believe that is a sincere policy that both the Conservatives and the Reform Party have adopted.
There's another conversation to have next time, and I think there's many more of these to be. We need to talk about it. That's the first thing. But then I get miserable, and I'll go home and I'll have three scotches tonight. It's all your fault, all of you. But thank you anyway. That's my excuse. Our panel has been fantastic. Thank you to Nuriyah Khan, David Atherton, and Robin Tilbrook. This has been The Protagonist.